What's up, everybody? Welcome to Heresy Financial. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Yesterday, I posted a video about all the negative consequences that our country and the world, frankly, has experienced since we left all connection to the gold standard in 1971 when Nixon closed the gold window. Besides just prices increasing, we've had a ton of horrible consequences as a result of that, including but not limited to the wealth gap, the income gap, and increasing violence. If you haven't already, I encourage you to go back and watch that video. But today, I'm going to give you some tools that you can use in order to recognize that the official inflation numbers that we look at do not reflect reality. This is important right now as we're heading into an unprecedented period of monetary expansion, where the federal government, in coordination with the Federal Reserve, is pursuing a monetary and a fiscal policy that is extremely easy, extremely expansive, pertaining to the total supply of money. They are injecting a ton of new money into the system at the same time as everything is sort of collapsing from an economic perspective. We're seeing unemployment skyrocket at the same time as the stock market is skyrocketing. And so what we're going to look at today are some ways that you can recognize that the Federal Reserve and the government is not, they're not giving us the true and accurate reflection of real inflation numbers. And so when you start to realize you can't afford life anymore, you know you're not going crazy. Let's dive in. Thank you again for watching this video with me today. We are looking at the four main ways that the government hides the true inflation numbers from the American public. And I'd love to remind you guys about this because it can really help you out with your own efficiency. A little bit off topic, but hit the setting icon, the setting button on the YouTube player, and change the speed of playback, because you can get through videos way faster. Listen to it on 1.5 or 2 times speed. I know I kind of talk a little bit slow, and so if you do that, you can get through videos, my videos, anybody else's videos, podcasts even, way faster. It's a great life hack there you can use to consume content faster. I have a few resources linked in the description below if you'd like to go and take a look at some of the sources that do things like try and accurately project and calculate what the true inflation numbers are per city. And if we hadn't made some of the deceptive changes to the index and how the calculations are made back in 1980, if you look at those two resources, it shows that inflation, depending on the city you live in, is probably actually somewhere in between 5 and 10% right now, nowhere near the under 2% that they're saying it is. There are four main ways that they hide the true inflation numbers from us, and the first method is called the substitution method. Now, let's say the index includes something like bratwursts in the bratwurst sausages in the index as far as a calculation for the cost of food. Well, if bratwursts for whatever reason become a little bit too expensive, well, then there might be a shift where some people stop buying brats and they start buying hot dogs instead. Now, in reality, if you are trying to give an accurate representation of how much the cost of living is going up by, you're going to continue to measure brats, right? Because the cost of living at whatever the level is, whatever level you're measuring, you're going to continue to measure how much those things have increased by in cost. Well, what the index does, it is actually replaces the more expensive item with whatever the public replaces that item with, like hot dogs. And so for plenty of things in the index, anytime something gets expensive, it gets substituted out with the replacement item or object instead of the thing that originally kept on getting more expensive. And so this hides the true inflation, the true amount that prices are increasing by, because you just keep on swapping out the things that are getting more expensive for the things that are cheaper. Now, it's true that people are buying the cheaper things, but now you don't have an index that measures the prices increasing anymore. Right now, you just have an index that measures the cost of survival. It doesn't measure the cost of the increase in the cost of living. The second method that they use in order to hide the inflation numbers is with computing power and with with computers. Now, we know that technology has a way of increasing its computing power every couple of years, and the developments and the increases in the power is very beneficial for society. What the CPI does is it calculates the cost per unit of computing power instead of taking into account the average cost of, let's say, a cell phone or a smartphone or a laptop or a tablet. They look at the total units of processing power, of computing power, and those are falling drastically, right? But the problem is you don't buy a cell phone based off of how much computing power it has, and you're not getting a discount on your cell phone because it's got double the amount of computing power as the one from 2 years ago. It's still the same price, or probably actually even more. The total iPhone, you can't get half the iPhone for half the amount of computing power just because you want to buy it at a cheaper price. They're going to include a lot more efficiency, a lot more productive technology in the same package, and they're going to charge the same or more for it. And so the CPI is able to record, and it deflates it. It takes down the level of price increases that are truly happening in reality, because it's only measuring the actual cost of the units of processing power, computing power. It's not actually trying to calculate the cost of the end product. And so we've seen that have a huge impact on the amount of price increases that it actually takes into account. Now, the third way that the inflation numbers mask what is actually truly representative of reality is something called hedonics. Basically, it's the opposite of the substitution method. So when you go out and you're shopping for appliances, the average cost of the refrigerator or washing machine and a dryer or an oven or a dishwasher, it has increased drastically over the years. But the CPI, it doesn't actually take that into account, because the features that are included in these products have increased and they've gotten better. And so they look at that and they say, hey, well, you're actually buying something that is a higher quality. And so if the average cost is going up, but we can also see that the average quality has gone up, well, then we're going to use that and kind of deflate the cost, the average cost, because you're not paying for the same product, you're paying for a higher quality product. And there's a small kernel of truth to that, but again, the average price has increased. And there are a lot of new features that are getting plugged into even the base models of appliances over the last couple of decades that the Fed is able to use and say, hey, look, costs aren't going up, when in reality they are. They're just saying, hey, well, there's more features included, so you should expect to pay more. When in reality, technology and efficiency and productivity should make things cheaper over time. And lastly, the final thing that they do is they focus way too much on core CPI rather than the full CPI index. And the reason they do this is because the core CPI, it removes things like housing and food and energy, tuition. It doesn't take into account some of these things. They say it's volatile. It's not volatile. It just shows the true level of inflation a lot more. Tuition has obviously skyrocketed. Healthcare has compounded and grown massively over the last couple of decades. Housing obviously has gone up a lot, and when housing costs go up, that for somebody who's buying a house, that impacts you. Your expenses and cost of living goes up. Even if you're renting, if you're renting from a landlord that had to buy that house, and if it was more expensive, they're going to have to rent that house out for hire to pay off their expenses, their mortgage. And so housing costs have gone up, and food, especially right now when we have a supply chain crunch and a demand surge from people trying to stock up, you're going to see massive increases in the cost of living, specifically regarding food. And these are all going to be ignored because they're not included in the numbers that the Federal Reserve is using and looking at. Now, last week I did a video series on living on your own gold standard. And in the investing video, I showed you a chart that shows the gold to Dow ratio. And that prices the Dow in terms of ounces of gold. You can also price pretty much anything in terms of gold. And you can see that when you price things in terms of gold, they get cheaper over time. Even though we've been brainwashed as a society to think that over time things get expensive, when you compare them against a sound money supply, sound money system that doesn't have the ability to be artificially created out of thin air, you see that life gets cheaper over time, not more expensive. It's not a natural thing. That's a forced thing, inflation. When you look at the cost of food, the cost of housing, life gets cheaper over time when you're comparing it against a sound money system, comparing it against something like gold. So this is very timely to be able to have this at the front of your mind as you're watching things unfold over the next couple of months, because we're about to experience the final crack up boom, the final decline in the dollar, and a large part of it is going to be masked and hidden from the general public as long as possible. It's one of the reasons why we're seeing the stock market go up right now, because there's so much money being injected into the economy right now, and it's all funneling into asset prices at first. This is the Cantillon effect. The new money always hits asset prices first. So don't be fooled. Inflation is happening. Their numbers will probably not reflect it when you use the official numbers. They're going to be able to use all their tricks and little schemes to hide how much inflation there really is. And once they can't even hide how much inflation there is anymore, by that time it will be far too late to do anything about it, and hyperinflation will have officially set in. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or thoughts, let me know in the comments section below. You guys have a great day.